Welcome to the Lean Out Your Business podcast, a show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs accelerate business growth and simplify success. I'm your host, Krista Grasso, and I've been working with businesses for more than 2 decades to help them lean out and optimize what's working while eliminating anything that's not adding value. So if you are ready to get more time back in your day, more profit in your business, and to do business differently, growing and scaling on your terms, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. Today, we're going to be diving into Zone of Genius. And this is part of a 2-part series on Zone of Genius. The other episode is all about misperceptions. So what I wanted to talk about today was, how do you know if something is your zone of excellence or if something is your zone of genius? And I want to share a fun story about an epiphany that I had around my zone of genius, because I'm sure that while the story won't be exactly the same for you, you've probably had something similar happen. So I know that the concept of zone of genius is really well known. And if it's something that either you're not really familiar with, or maybe you've heard of but have not actually read the book, I highly recommend that you either read or reread The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. It's one of those few books that I actually reread multiple times, at least once per year, sometimes even more often, because I find I take something a little bit different away from it each time that I read it. And I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do, but the whole concept of Zone of Genius really struck me. And I realized after so many years of leading my business and doing what I do, that I actually have spent a lot of time in my zone of excellence, not realizing that it wasn't my zone of genius. And while I'm grateful that my business has been really successful through that entire journey, it was really stepping into more of my zone of genius that made things so much more fun in my business, that made things feel so much more fulfilling, and that completely changed how I ended my day. Instead of feeling drained, or instead of feeling tired or exhausted, or instead of counting down until the day was over, it's hard sometimes to even pull myself away from my computer. It's hard to pull myself away from my work. It's that solid self-care practice that I had to impose and put in place in order to stop myself from working, because I love what I do so much, and I frequently don't even feel like what I'm doing is work. And when I was spending more time in my zone of excellence, I actually liked what I did. It wasn't that I disliked it at all. I liked it, but I felt differently about it. I didn't feel as energized about it. I was really good at it, and my clients valued what I did. They would have said that what I was doing was my zone of genius, and many of them did, so I believed it for a long time. But really, at the end of the day, it did not fuel me. It did not energize me, and it felt like work. There's a few questions that Gay asks inside the book that I'm going to share with you. And I find all of these to be valuable. However, the one about whether something feels like work or not is the one that really has been transformational for me. So here's the questions that he shares in the book. What do I most love to do? I love it so much I can do it for long stretches of time without getting tired or bored. What work do I do that doesn't seem like work? Again, I can do it all day long without ever feeling tired or bored. In my work, what produces the highest ratio of abundance and satisfaction to the amount of time spent? Even if I only do it 10 seconds or a few minutes of it, an idea or a deeper connection may spring forth that leads to huge value. And finally, what is my unique ability? There's a special skill I'm gifted with. This unique ability, fully realized and put to work, can provide enormous benefits to me and any organization I serve. So those are the 4 questions that he asks in the book. And of course, he goes on to give some examples and also really help you understand zone of excellence and the other zones as well. So I'm curious which of those questions is most impactful for you in determining what your zone of genius is. Mine is definitely the one about things feeling like work and something that I could do all day long. Let me share a funny story with you. about my realization that leading transformational business retreats is a zone of genius for me. Now, if somebody had asked me if this was a zone of genius and I spent any time thinking about it, I probably would have said yes, but I never stopped to think about it. I absolutely love every single thing about retreats. I love strategizing about them. I love planning them. I love leading them. I love facilitating the workshops. I love facilitating the transformation for the people who attend. It is something that I could do all day, every day, and I feel energized at the end of the day instead of drained. But I never thought of it as a zone of genius until someone said something to me at the last retreat that I hosted in the fall. So here's what happened. Each day of the retreat, although I did not give anyone homework and I did not tell anyone that they needed to go back to their room that night and take action, being with an incredible group of high achieving, absolute rock star business owners, that is exactly what they did. So we'd all wrap up the day for the retreat. We'd get together and have this amazing dinner. And then what did they do? They went back to their work. They went back to their room and they put into action everything we talked about. They created marketing campaigns. They refined offers. They made sales and generated revenue before the retreat was even over. These women were incredible action takers and I absolutely loved it. So one morning I was sharing with them just how impressed I was with them and how proud of them I was that they were showing up and taking this so seriously and immediately taking action on what we talked about. And I had made this comment in passing and said, yeah, I haven't worked at all this week. And you could have heard a pin drop. They were all giving me a serious case of the WTF face. And I was not sure what I had said or what I had done. And then finally, one of them just looked at me and said, really? You haven't worked all week? Really? How about leading this retreat? And we all got a really great laugh out of that. But the ironic thing is, I truly didn't think I was working. Like, if you had asked me if I was working, I did say no. I never stopped to think about the fact that here I was putting in these like 10, 12-hour days with the retreat, from the prep in the morning to leading the retreat to going out to dinner afterwards to prepping the space for the next day. There was a lot of moving pieces and a lot of things that were done. And my team did the bulk of it, which was amazing, but I still had quite a bit to do, not to mention the fact that I facilitated the entire event. And yet I truly didn't believe I was working. To me, I was thinking about the fact that I hadn't cracked open my laptop. I hadn't checked email. I hadn't been on Voxer or Slack. I hadn't done any of the things that feel like work to me. So I never even stopped to consider that leading this incredible retreat was actually work. To me, leading retreats feels like play. It feels fun. It's something I love to do. It's something I would do for free. Now, that's not a great business strategy to do things for free, but it's something I would do for free because I love it that much. And it was in that moment that I realized a couple things. First of all, I realized, wait a minute, this is a zone of genius for me. This is something I've done for 20-something years. And I love every aspect of it. I love it so much. I want to do more of it. And not only do I want to lead my own retreats, but I want to help other people create these amazing and transformational experiences for their clients. And that's actually influenced a lot of what I'm doing with my business model for this year and going into the future. You'll notice I have more retreats on the calendar this year. I'm actually infusing retreats into my mentorship program. There's so much value in in-person experiences, and you can take something that would take 6 months to a year, and you can condense that transformation and impact down to a matter of days if you really know how to lead a really good retreat experience for people. So that first thing that I realized is, yes, this is a zone of genius, and I really want to do a lot more of it. So I've made sure that I'm infusing a lot more of that into the work I do. But the other thing that I realized is this: when something feels kind of effortless to us, when something feels fun, When something is just completely energizing and fueling and exciting to us, we frequently don't really realize it's work, or even if we do, we don't always realize it's a zone of genius. Not unless someone else points it out to us. I can't tell you how much time I spent trying to figure out my zone of genius. And I'm saying that in air quotes because I had Miro boards and whiteboards, and we'd strategize with my team and like, what's our differentiator? What's my zone of genius? What makes me different? And I was trying to do it as this logical activity early on in the early days of my business. And it's not this logical activity that you necessarily map out. It's just something that you realize. It was that epiphany where I was like, oh, this is something I've done for years. This is something I love doing. It's something I never even would have considered. It never made it on any of those sticky notes, never made it on my whiteboard. It never made it in Miro because I didn't even think about it because it was just so effortless and fun for me to do that I never thought about it as work. And that right there was the problem in trying to think really hard on what my zone of genius was because I was looking at all the work I was doing to figure out which pieces of my work were my zone of genius. But the reality is the things that were my zone of genius didn't feel like work, so I wasn't thinking of them. And it made me realize that so much of what I was thinking through was actually my zone of excellence. Things that I was really great at, things I get people great results with, things that my clients love and appreciate and would tell me all the time were zones of genius. But I did not feel about them the same way that I did the things that truly were my zone of genius. So I'd love to challenge you to pay attention to what your zone of genius is, because I don't think it's a figure it out. I don't think I could give you homework right now and say, hey, go bust out your sticky notes or get your whiteboard or get your team together and have a conversation about what your zone of genius is. Maybe you can, and maybe it would work for you. But when I've done that in the past, what I've realized over time is that all those great things that we came up with, those were really my zone of excellence. It was much more just paying attention to the times or the experiences, like at the retreat, where I didn't even realize that I was doing something that was a zone of genius because it truly didn't even feel like work to me. And I bet you have a lot of those things as well. So one of the things that I really have been focused on, so one more thing to think about is, what would it feel like in your business if you were able to spend 80% or more of your time in your zone of genius? What if every single thing that you did in your business felt like play instead of feeling like work? How much of your time do you get to spend truly in your zone of genius today? Which things in your business do not feel like play? Those are absolutely the first place to look at delegating and getting them off your plate, maybe putting some systems or automations in place, whatever it is that you need to do so that you can spend more of your precious time doing those things that you love, that fuel you, that energize you, and that don't even feel like work at all. I hope you got a lot of value out of this episode, and it helps you to think a little bit more about what your zone of genius is. If you'd like to join me in person for one of my transformational business retreats, head over to leanoutmethod.com/retreats for all the detail and register to join me. And I can't wait to spend a few days together with you in person, focused on simplifying and scaling your business. I will see you again next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. I hope you got a lot of value and actionable insights from today's show, and would love if you take a moment to leave us a review. If you have any questions on today's episode or on how to lean out your business, join us over in our private Facebook community, where every week we do live training and Q&A, and I'd love to have you be part of the conversation. Head to leanoutmethod.com/group to join us. And before you go, be sure to subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when we release a new episode. We'll see you next week.